Well, hello everybody, and thank you for joining us for Savannah Jewish Family Services Food for Thought program. Please note, if you have any questions during the program, please write them in the chat. We'll have Q&As at the end. Before we begin, I have a special announcement to make. We're going back in person. Starting August 5th at 12:30, we'll be having Food for Thought back at the JEA with interesting speakers and a delicious meal. I hope to see you all there. For today's program, I'm honored to introduce Sarah Weiss Poland. Sarah dedicates her career to Jewish education. She developed curriculum which earned awards and national recognition for innovation and alternatives in Jewish education. Sarah also works to develop innovative family education programming within synagogues in Boca Raton. Sarah is a native New Yorker, has 3 children, and is an advocate for arts and education. She's the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor and is deeply committed to Israel education and advocacy. Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you today. Whether you're here and I can see your face, or you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook or all these fabulous places that I've heard you can all watch. I think that all this is great, and I'm excited that you're able to one day soon get back together and see each other. It's really, really nice. And one day I hope to meet you as well. So today I'm actually coming to speak to you from an organization called Stand With Us. Stand With Us is an international and nonpartisan Israel education organization. We educate and inspire people of all ages and backgrounds, and inspired by our love for Israel, we started to develop different departments within Stand With Us. Our first one that we did was our campus department. We said these kids need to really learn about Israel and Israel advocacy. And we thought that that was going to be early enough. And we said, oh, okay, no, it's not early enough for campus. We need to start a high school department. And so they started the high school department, where it's really peer-to-peer education. And it's one of the glories, a really wonderful trophy department of Stand With Us. And then we said, hold on a minute, we're not starting early enough. We need to start our Israel education actually in middle school. And not even then, we're actually even thinking about doing a little bit more of our lower school, elementary school year Israel education. So people are asking, what is different about the Israel education program that we talk about when we talk about Israel Link? Israel Link is one of our departments. It's actually a full educational resource hub that students use, and I'm going to show you a little bit of that today and how our Israel education is different from others. Students who participate in Israel Link have a better understanding of Israel's significance relating to their Jewish identity. So we talk about who they are as kids and who they are as people and how that relates to Israel. So you're going to say, how does this relate to me? Why is this important? The reason it's important, I'm going to tell you my story, and only just my story. I'm what am I, 45 officially, just a few days ago old. I am a Holocaust survivor's granddaughter. So I grew up in a way that I'm sure many of you many of my parents grew up, and my grandmother, in a way that many of you probably did. But I still had shoes under my bed. My parents made sure there's a certain I think they're talking about a genetic trauma. There's a certain amount of trauma that I definitely grew up with in my household. And Israel is seen as this golden piece, right? I never learned a lot about Israel that wasn't completely beautiful and completely positive. It's a growing nation. It is a sacred nation. All of these things are 100% true. They are all true. There's rainbows, and it's beauty, and it's Hebrew, and it's love, and it's culture, and it's our Judaism, and it's all of the things that we know, including the idea of our security. However, these young kids I have 3 of my own and nieces and nephews, and I'm sure you all have grandchildren. They are not learning Israel in the same way. And so I'd like to present a little bit to you today about how they're learning about Israel and what we're doing to help them to have a better understanding so that they don't say the words, "You never told me." So we're dealing with a lot of that in the "you never told me." So I'm actually going to show this to you now. Let me present. This is my presentation mode. So today I titled my whole presentation, "You Never Told Me." And it's really addressing our must-have Israel conversations among our teens and even these younger kids who are learning stuff in social media. So what is Israel Link? So if I would tell you, so basically Israel Link is a website. I can give you that website. It's www.israellink.org. You go on and there's a variety of different options for education. So what are the variety? What do you get? So Israel Link right now is geared toward helping middle school students, as I said, create those connections to Israel. So we do that by going into the schools, into day schools and congregational schools. And the kids themselves get to go into the website and their teachers work with them. And so they have units like identity, Israel and you, Israel by the numbers. We learn about diversity, humanitarian aid, innovation and technology. So a lot of times these kids will say, "Oh, I know that something really cool. We know about grape tomatoes or something, a watermelon with no seeds," right? And these are all these cool innovations that Israel has. But sometimes they might picture Israel as completely white Eastern European Jews, right? That's not what Israel is. So our diversity lessons are made up of 8 different lessons, including Ethiopian, Yemen, Druze, Christian Aramean, like all different people, including Arab Israeli, that we're going to look at a little bit today so that you get an idea of what these kids are learning and what we have to be ready as adults to help them unpack. So we train these educators and our youth professionals to use our curriculum and to also help them with their own Israel education. So we'll do their own professional development. So the next piece that we do that I really like is that there's something called Israel Link Generations, and is a new program where we're going to help to give these parents the tools that they need in order to partner with the schools, right? I have, just like you might have, kids who are coming to us, Bubby, Zadie, Mommy, Daddy. What does this mean? What does it mean when you say that Israel, is an instigator? What does it mean that Israel bombed people and we, in just this last thing that just happened? What does it mean that we killed hundreds of people and we're the ones in the wrong? And they're seeing this. Do not think that they're not. They see it on their social media. There are things called TikTok, and you think that TikTok is just for dances and it's just for makeup or dietary things, which are totally fun, and comedians, but they're not. A lot of things are without even realizing their underlying messages about Israel and about current events. So we did realize that this was happening even for our younger kids, and started these new units, which we'll do today a little bit: Israeli Arabs, Israeli Jews, and then also our complex conversations. So I can tell you more about that as we go. But I don't necessarily want to bore you with all of the ins and outs of this fabulous curriculum. But it's important that we all know, and that we're all given the gear that we need to the correct supply that we need to give our kids and our next generation of how to speak about Israel. And so that's what Complex Conversations is. So actually, when I said that "you never told me," I didn't realize, although I think of myself as extremely amazing and innovative, I didn't realize that this was already a hashtag. And the the hashtag is the Twitter thing, right? And I guess I'm that cool. When I looked it up, I realized that You Never Told Me was already a hashtag. Um, and it's trending. That's what's called trending. So don't ask me what that means. I actually am not our social media person, and I do not even know what that means. But if you hashtag this, that You Never Told Me, you will see that there are Jewish students from all these affiliated youth programs, and even more so, people are getting it in a lot of different, even before COVID, and a lot of Israel organizations that would travel to Israel. This feeling that you never told me, I didn't know. So in from USY, people are USY people, says you never told me that the occupation doesn't actually keep any of us safe. I felt defeated and lied to. I couldn't believe how much learning was ahead of me. That's a BBYO. Nifty. I was never taught to think critically about the occupation. A JCC, like much like your own. You never told me that the land without a people, for a people, without a land, was a bustling land full of beautiful people. That one always gives me goosebumps. I relate to that somehow. And I wonder which ones you might relate to. Hearing these is very heartbreaking because we have this picture of Israel in our hearts and in our minds that we want to relay to our children, that much like everything else, the outside world is affecting them, and we're like, stop, I don't want, we need to tell you the story. So much like the way that I like to parent and teach, and I hope that some of you do too, and I'm sure that you continue to do. My parents and my grandmother actually just told me parenting never ends. And even if you're helping your children to parent and your children's children to parent, which is what my grandmother is doing right now, you have to know that them hearing it from you is probably the best thing that you can do. So I'm actually going to share with you what we share with some of our kids. Seth Rogen, if you know who he is, a very popular American comedic actor, he made a statement not so long ago about Israel, and I'd really like to share this with you. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger and make sure that my sound is shared. And then it is, and then maybe we can talk a bit more about it.
I also think that as a Jewish person, like, I was fed a huge amount of lies about Israel
Me
my
too.
entire
Your entire life.
You know?
Yeah.
They never tell you that. Oh, by the way, there were people there. They make it seem like it was just like, man, sitting there.
Yeah,
It was like the fucking doors open.
Hours for the taking.
I'm afraid of Jews. I'm 100% afraid of Jews.
Oh, yeah.
That's it.
All they want to know is that, do you believe we can kill them? Do you think they deserve a country, or can we kill them?
For truly the preservation of Jewish people, it makes no sense, because again, you don't keep something you're trying to preserve all in one place, especially when that place has proven to be
volatile,
pretty volatile, you know.
Okay, so let me make that smaller and go back out of my full screen. So I don't know how you feel, but this is pretty difficult to watch, right? I don't like watching this. Oh wait, let me just go back. I'm sorry if it's not the correct way. Okay, I find that pretty difficult to watch, and I don't know if some of you have seen a little bit of that, but it does go back to this idea. I think one of them, one of the tweets said, "I'm sorry that he had a bad Israel education." Right? It's not my fault that he had a bad Israel education. And then the question really is, well, whose fault is it? It's not really a fault. Whose responsibility? Whose responsibility is it to give people a wide range of information that we can then take and say, yes, here are some facts. Here are some people's perspectives, and let me help you to grow, speak about it in a knowledgeable way, and love Israel. And love Israel and believe in Israel and still want, still be proudly Zionistic, right? Okay, so, oh, sorry, I did not mean to do that. Let me go to my next thing. I'm going to go to my next slide, which I thought I could do by pressing that button. Okay, there. So here's the question is, how do we engage in other people's perspectives? So here's what's happening in Hebrew school, and from having taught Hebrew school and day school stuff for basically my whole career. We as educators and as parents certainly want to teach the next generation that Judaism is, yes, it's about law, and it's about Shabbat, and it's about sitting at a Seder table and knowing what kind of foods, and oh, my child has to learn the Manishtana, and all of us clap when that little one knows their Hebrew. And there are certain things that if you really take it apart, what means something to you that you've successfully passed on to the next generation? I engage in that question a lot in my head. Having been a day school graduate, my children are in public school and in synagogue school right now. I engage in that question a lot because I really do have to think about what is it that I want my children to be learning. And from that, a lot of what we say is we want you to be good people. Values that are taught to you using the values, well, I say the values of Torah, the values of knowing right and wrong, and of hopefully once in a while, when you decide to go to synagogue and go to shul, you'll be able to hear one or two things from the rabbi that extrapolates something good from a Torah portion, and you can put that in your life and say, wow, I never thought about that perspective before. But when we talk about things being good and people being good, I want my child to come out with values and with right and wrong. That gets complicated when we're talking about Israel. It certainly got complicated when all of social media, they called it the Instafada from Instagram, this past sort of what I call it war that happened, right? We got tons of calls from different middle schools around the country. Everyone crazed that what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to speak to our kids about the most current things that are happening in Israel? And how do we define for them when they are hearing things that may or may not be on what their definition that we are trying to teach them, their definition of right? Are we on the right, the moral side of this? And so those are some of the conversations that we really try and have. How do we have those? For high school kids, that is a little bit easier. We can go to social media. We can talk about about anti-Semitism, and we definitely do in middle school as well. The foundations of anti-Semitism, how it started, what it looked like yesterday, what it looks like today, and how you're hearing it and feeling it on social media, how you feel when someone speaks to you about Israel. But if you don't know about Israel and don't have the education of the fact that the Jews are indigenous to the land of Israel, that we have been there, that it is diverse, that there is a lot of different people and a lot of different stories and a long history. How do you know what to say? So we believe that it starts with the education, and the way that you engage is by you have to first learn your own. You have to learn Israel. You've got to learn it as a real country. You've got to start talking about the things that are difficult to talk about. So what we do, and I want to give you an example of how we teach our kids. So in the actual Israel Link curriculum, we don't ignore that there are different kinds of people living in Israel, right? That's what I said in terms of diversity. And I don't want you to think that this is the only thing that Israel Link does. We've got beautiful humanitarian aid talking about refugees and Israel Aid. We actually in our resource hub, we just did all those articles and videos, people down in Surfside in Florida. Like, this is what Israel does. We send people around the world to go and help people around the world, right? There's a beauty in the things that Israel does, in addition to all the innovations. So I did want to bring out to you today about these components of how we deal with the hard stuff so that the kids know how to relate to it and how to speak about it. So I'm going to share you two short videos that are from our website. Oh, I'm sorry. Two different videos that are from our website. I'm just going to actually stop the share for a second and go back to, there are two different videos from our website that are two different perspectives of people that live in Israel. Okay, so these are two Israeli Arabs, and they have their different perspectives. So let me, actually, I'm going to need a thumbs up for 1 second that I'm sharing the correct thing. Hold on 1 second, let me share my screen. This is this. So thumbs up that you see, this is actually our Israel Link. Yes, okay, good. That this is actually what Israel Link is. So as you can see, these are all our different units that we have. So this is identity, Jewish continuity, Israel by the numbers. We can see its size and geographics, diversity, humanitarian aid, innovation and technology. And this is where we're going to talk about the Israeli Arabs, Israeli Jews, and the complex conversations. So let me just skip for a moment to what I want to show you. So I'm going to take us actually into the diversity lesson. And so all of these you're actually looking at what a teacher looks at. And so this is super fun because the teachers have access and the students have access to everything. So as I said, we do Christian Aramean. I'm so sorry, for some reason this part isn't loading. Okay, these are the two that I want to show to you today. Okay, this is our Arab Israelis. So I'm going to show you this video. This is one woman's experience, okay? So it's a 2-minute video. And I will make sure, again, let me just make sure that you can hear my sound. You can, okay.
I believe that we live in one place, we're living together. So I think that we have to deal with it. We have to find a solution for this thing, not a conflict, but we have to get our rights, and you have to get your rights. So
explain what rights you don't have now. You were talking about it before.
What rights? We don't learn in our language.
In university.
In our language, in university.
Everything is in Hebrew.
Okay, so this is one thing. The second thing, that you didn't feel that you're a part of this place, this country. I don't feel it. I don't feel that I have. I don't feel that anything is connected to me here. So this was
because everything is Zionist and Jewish. That's what you mean.
نحن مقدرين متعاطفين كفلسطينيين وبالخيم بتاخذ مدينة إسرائيل.
אוקיי.
ברור?
אז איך אתם רוצים לקרוא את ההגדרה של המדינה?
מדינת ישראל. كل عود هامنون زي الأم تسلسل لها
לא מדברים על ההמנון, זה בסדר, זה משהו אחר.
לפי ההמנון זה רק מדינה שלכם, אני לא שייך למדינה הזאת, זה לא יכול להיות מדינה גם שלי.
We need to study how to live with each other and respect each other backgrounds and history and what's happened to us here for both sides. I hope it'll be much better in the future than now.
מה חשוב לך?
מה שחשוב לי שהעם היהודי הוא יזכור שאנחנו בני דודים, ואז אלפי השנים שאנחנו חיים ביחד, וכל הזמן אני למשל, אני יודע שהיהודי הוא בן דוד שלי, הוא מלפני האסלאם בכמה אלפים שנים, שהוא עם חי, ואיך הוא טועה טעויות כאלו אני לא מבין. אתה קולט מה אני מתכוון? והבקשה שלי שאני מקווה שנהיה אחווה ונחיה ביחד. אני לא באתי מהשמיים, אנחנו לא באנו מהשמיים, אנחנו גם נולדנו פה וחיינו פה ומבקשים תקווה שנרגיש כאילו שזה המדינה גם שלנו, וזה מה שאני מקווה.
Okay. So as I said, that is from, our curriculum. And I'm going to give you one other perspective so that you understand that what we're doing is giving these kids different points of view, right? Is that something, and we would ask those kids, have you ever thought of that before? Did you know about that, right? So, okay, let's go to next one.
If there's anything you can take from my personal story, is that first of all, coexisting is possible. My name is Mohammed Zouabi, and I'm an Israeli Arab, 18-year-old Israeli Arab from Nazareth. Zouabi is a pretty big and influential family in the state of Israel. Now I have to clarify that in Arab terms, a family is basically a tribe, a clan. I know that many of you guys think that if they have like 10 or 15 cousins, that means that they have a big family. Well, let me tell you this. I have 15,000 family members only in Israel. Only in Israel. I grew up in Nazareth. Geographically, it's located in northern Israel. Demographically, it's a city that represents Israel's multiculturalism. It's a city where Jews, Muslims, Christians, and many others live together peacefully as friendly neighbors. This diversity, even within families, within small communities, represents what Israel is all about. Now, growing up in Israel as an Israeli Arab, I had the option of studying in Arabic-speaking schools, and I had the option of studying in Hebrew-speaking schools. The very fact that Israel has an educational system for its Arab minority in their tongue language, an educational system that will help them preserve and keep their culture and history, is pretty concrete evidence that Israel is actually helping its Arab community preserve its cultures and identity. I love calling Hebrew-speaking schools in Israel sort of reflection to the Israeli society. You see Jews, Muslims, Christians, and others all studying together, all working together, and all coexisting together. The very fact that people coexist on a daily basis in Israel with each other is a side of Israel that is not being highlighted today in the world. Honestly, this respect of other cultures is the Israel I know, and the Israel I defend, and the Israel I love. And that's what I want you to remember. Yes, I'm an Arab Muslim who also happens to be gay and vegetarian. I'm an Arab Muslim who has been helped by Muslims, Christians, and Jews in the only Jewish country in the world. If that's not a message of hope and peace, I don't know what is. Thank you.
All right. So I'm just going to stop the share for a moment. And so I just want you to take a moment to think about those two videos and about why we definitely thought that it was important. At first, we only had Mohammed's video, and we decided that this was not the education that we need to have. It's not, people are going to be asking, and these kids, again, the last thing that we want them to hear is new information that they've never heard of before once they get to high school. So teaching them that there are people who don't feel at home and other people that do feel at home gives those differing perspectives that we're wishing to share. Let's get back. I have a few more minutes and I'm excited to share more with you. Let me make sure that I have the correct things up. Now I've made myself all crazy. Hold on one second. And I wanna continue to share my screen with you. Okay. So we watched those two videos. So actually I'm going to give you a little bit more fun stuff right now instead, because I want to give you an idea of a little bit more of the fun stuff that we also do with the kids about Israel that also is like stuff that they may not necessarily know. So let's share this again and let me present so I go on my full screen. So we do this super fun game that we actually had to do during coronavirus. We ended up having to do so much of our teaching and helping our other teachers do things online. So we actually had a lot of fun playing games like Kahoot. These kids, Kahoot is an online digital game, which is so fun to do. And there's a winner at the end, and you don't know if something, who's going to win. And so that's a lot of fun. And we're actually developing a lot of different games coming up. I can tell you more about that. But so this is one of those things. So we're not going to play the game with you, but so we called it, one of the people, of our people in Chicago, because we have people all over, coined this "is real or is fake." So that was a lot of fun. And so we asked the kids, Israel invented a pill that contains a camera, which after being swallowed takes pictures of your insides. So the question was, is that real or is it fake, right? So the kids don't know that. It happened to be at that time, somebody did actually know the answer to it because somebody's parent was actually going through something gastroenterology wise and had just done it, so it was actually really cool. So then our second question is, we do modern day drip irrigation was created when an Israeli farmer took water from the Dead Sea and sprinkled it on its crops. So the question was, is real or is fake? And the answer, it's actually fake. So the true story is Simcha Blas, who was a Polish-Israeli engineer, and he was an inventor, and he developed the modern drip irrigation system. So, and it was created when actually a pipe broke. Actually, I didn't know this until this information. The pipe broke and accidentally began delivering the right amount of water to one particular tree. So they realized that, oh, if something breaks, if we make breaks in the pipes, we can do it directly. So as with a lot of things, things happen by mistake, right? In learning new things. So that's a lot of fun. The next thing, I'm just actually going to stop my share for a moment. Some of the new things that we are going to be working on we are currently working on to engage our kids a bit more. We have a full resource library for the kids, which has lots of current event information based on any of those topics that we were talking about, so the kids can find videos and articles and really anything that they want. And stay within the confines of our website so that they don't have to go Googling. We feel that that's really important. And we're also working on three different games right now. One that I've been working on personally. We're in the process of one of our goals and objectives for our middle school is that the kids see this continuity in the land of Israel, that the Jews were indigenous and that we've been on Israeli land, Israel lands or throughout time. And so we are doing a new digital game and working with a game designer. It's very exciting. And the kids are going to be able to play sort of a fun fact numeric game based on the game Wits and Wagers, if anybody knows that. So it's called Beseder, and it actually has sort of a cool name because obviously Beseder in Hebrew is, good, it's fine. But it also has has the idea of a Seder, an order, and at the end of each of the games, the kids are going to be able to see a timeline in the end of the questions that they did. So we're really super excited about it, and our goal is to continue to create more innovative learning that gives the kids this sense of identity and love and connection and understanding, good, bad, everything, and that we can be the resource for all of that education that they need. So if you have any questions of any kind or want information for your children or children's children, and you want to bring something, program into your communities or your children's communities, please just let me know. We're really happy to participate and to learn what your community needs are. And Sunny will give you all my information if you don't already have it. So maybe I'll just give it time if anybody has a question or
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sarah. So I know I see some questions in our chat already. So Carol, you can feel free to mute yourself. I'm only going to do 2 or 3 questions today.
Okay. Well, I've got about 2 or 3 questions, so I could fill your whole time.
Let's see if somebody else also has some. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So the first thing is I'm very impressed by what you're doing. What I have to say is I am of the generation where Israel was the David to the Goliath of the world, and we thought of Israel as being the underdogs who were then indestructible. I have 2 grown children. One of them was an Israeli archaeologist. The problem is day school education, belonging to 3 different synagogues, all with a different perspective. But we have my archaeologist child, after 10 years, really said, "Ma, you don't know Israel at all." And I work in Jewish cultural arts and have done many different programs where I brought photo exhibits or poster exhibits about Zionism, about Judaism, or whatever, about the Holocaust. So to hear this from my children is very difficult because they are the instant information generation. And when you are dealing with, and so it's so important, and you hit the nail on the head, that we really, by giving them only positive things, we thought we were helping to give them an inspiration about Judaism that would give them pride, because my generation, all we learned about was the Holocaust.
Right.
So then there was the switch. So let's talk less about the Holocaust and all of the positive stuff that Israel can do, but the PR at Israel and was not very good. But the reality, when my son went to Israel, of the Palestinian conflict and the baked-in versus the common Israeli, non-religious Israeli, and what he saw as racism against Ethiopians and about Sephardi, was very different from anything I prepared him for. Right. So this is my fault. And you are in many ways handling this with the information that you provide. But how are you training teachers to actually use these materials? Because you're opening up a Pandora's box of material when you talk about perspective, and you're talking about, I mean, and I don't know if you deal with the fact that, you know, that that Palestinians often are dealing with removal of artifacts from archaeological sites to try and disprove the fact that there is a historical precedence for Jews ever being in the area. And what gets out, what doesn't get out, are the teachers trained, once the discussion happens, to deflect and to help children, as you talked about critical thinking, but help them to understand not just the complexity of this land, but also to feel good about Israel because this could go to a very negative place. And I will be quiet now.
I loved hearing you talk about that. Thank you so much. You said a lot of things that I would always be interested on hitting on. The first, where you're saying your son hadn't heard it, and just having the Ethiopian you brought up. One of our videos is Fanta Farada, and she's an Ethiopian that came in an operation from Ethiopia. Her family came in. She came in when she was young, and she tells us about a restaurant that she opened in Tel Aviv, and that one of the reasons that she opened the restaurant is she feels that in Israel, a way to get to people and talk about different cultures is through food. And so she opened a great restaurant, and we talked to her, and she does talk about some of the racism that she felt when she first moved there, and us talking about these issues. The issues of racism, the issues of, we are a growing country. Here we are. I mean, I like to say that number one, yes, we do train our teachers to use our materials. So that I just want to say that. However, there are teachers who are not going to be comfortable, just like there are teachers who are not comfortable teaching Holocaust in our public schools, just like there are people who may not be comfortable teaching racism. These are issues, and it is a part of the bigger issue of professional development, and it is not something that we are going to be able to solve as immediately or as much as we want to. We do believe at IsraelLink that there is a need for a systemic change from what kids are learning in day schools and congregational schools about Israel, right? We do it on Yom Ha'atzmaut, on Israel Independence Day, and everyone sort of does it at the end around that. And Israel is not really mentioned as any sort of modern place to live until that moment, and there just really needs to be a change in that. So I hope that I hit on some of the things that you were asking about. But yes,
yes, you really did. I think what is really of interest to me, because I need to explore this, I think because I still do a lot of teaching, or at least some. I am consulted for different educational curricula. I really am very interested in the generational link and how that works interfamily. So if I want to show your materials to my children, my grown children, and does it discount everything I've ever taught them about Israel? Does it bring it as a Q&A? Is it Socratic method? What is the best way that you have found for families who have already been there, done that, to go back and retrain themselves to talk about these issues differently?
That's such a good question. And I think that actually I started with the idea that parenting never ends, right? So I think that our programming, although I have taught this material to young professionals, and what you're saying exactly, grown people who just have not learned a lot of this stuff before, I have taught that material. Stand With Us is also an incredible arsenal of information. They have Stand With Us TV, they have speakers, they've got, so if you go to the website of Stand With Us, there's a ton of information. And no, it's not going to go against anything. The materials that we have, how you can access them, if, I get, that's a really good question. If you were to say, I want to teach our materials to an older crowd, I guess you'd have to ask us, and I'd have to get you logged in. And then there is usually it's again for middle school students, but there is a homeschool three session program that we do, that they would do self-guided on their own. So that is an interesting thing that I hear you saying. But part of our IsraelLink Generations, where I want to teach the parents, that is where I'm going to go. My idea is to go into federations, into Jewish schools, and that are using the program, and talk to the parents about the program. And for those that are unaffiliated, I would then give them access to this iLink, this school at home program. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And Carol, I know you might have a few other questions, but I'm going to stop streaming now. So I just want to thank you one more time, Sarah, and then we'll stay on the Zoom for a few more minutes. But I just wanted to let everybody know that's watching. Next week, we'll be here at the same time and the same link. We'll be hosting Chai Mitzvah, talking to us about grandparents, grandfriends, and beyond. So I hope to see you all